What's going on, collective listeners? How we doing today? Hopefully you guys are having a great day. It's about to get a lot better. We have Scott McWilliams, who is the Assistant Director of Athletic Performance for baseball and wrestling at the University of Minnesota. So this is going to be a little more wrestling based. Obviously, collegiate wrestling in the Big Ten is a big deal. And Scott's going to dive pretty deep into that. And he provides a ton of insight as to what his principles are, how they changed, and what he's doing now versus what he was doing when he first started with these guys. So awesome stuff from Scott. Let's get it going. What's going on, collective listeners? Welcome back for another episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Grasso. Today, we are joined by Scott McWilliams, as Assistant Director of Athletic Performance for baseball and wrestling at the University of Minnesota. Super psyched to have him on today. We're going to have a pretty solid chat here coming up. We've been talking a little bit before, and I was like, we need to start actually recording because I feel like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is pretty relevant to all the listeners and everybody who's obviously worked in the world of strength and conditioning. But Scott, welcome. Appreciate you hopping on and doing this. Obviously, if you will, please introduce yourself and just kind of let the people know, where you're from, where this whole thing started, and how it led to where you're at now at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on and you doing these podcasts. It's awesome for all the listeners to be able to hear and see what everybody's doing across the country. So that's awesome. Like you said, I'm Scott McWilliams from the University of Minnesota. Just started year 7. I guess to explain how I got here, really kind of got to run it all the way back to what I call my light bulb moment. Back in 2006, was getting ready to graduate high school. I was all set to go to a community college to go do their auto body program. Had an apartment, was all set for the whole deal. And the reason I was thinking about auto body and working mechanics, because I grew up real blue collar family. My dad was a mechanic, so naturally that's what I thought I would kind of do. But about a month before graduating high school, we had a career day, and all my buddies used it as kind of a senior skip day because we kind of knew what we were doing next. And for whatever reason, I chose not to and went to the career day. And the very last speaker I went to was a lady from UW La Crosse talking about physical therapy, physical education, strength and conditioning, personal training. And I'll forever term this as my light bulb moment. I'll remember right where I was sitting. I don't remember what she looked like or who she was, but like a light bulb went off above my head. I was like, that's me. I'd grown up, through high school, wrestling and playing football, and I was not an outstanding athlete by any means, but the only reason I ever got notoriety or any paid attention to by my coaches or anything, or had any level of success, was because I loved working out, loved working hard, loved spending time with my teammates and my coaches, and kind of pushing them sometimes, when they needed to be pushed. And it was in that moment where I was like, strength and conditioning, like I love the weight room, I love being in this team environment and doing this kind of stuff. What do you mean there's a world I can do that and I can get paid to do that? And so from that day forward, since 2006, I've never looked back and never thought twice that this is exactly where I wanted to be. So anyhow, ended up going to UW Platteville, which is where I'm originally from, Division III school down there, and opened up a ton of opportunities for me. Balanced a lot while I was in undergrad. Got my undergrad down there in health promotions, but while I was there as a high school wrestling coach, so that kind of got my foot in the door with some coaching experience. Also, while I was there, I think I was the first strength and conditioning intern. Jason Wagner, he was the football strength and conditioning coach. He allowed me to intern for him for a couple semesters. That led me to an opportunity to go spend the summer with the Badgers, did an internship with them. And then when I graduated in 2010, December 2010, Coach Wagner called January 2011, said, hey, we're pushing to bring on a legit assistant to work with all the other sports, because all the other sports, they were just doing their own thing at the time. He knew my background in wrestling, and he said, hey, your first opportunity. You've done a great job with us with football, and you can still kind of help out. But other teams, you need to get in front of other teams so we can make this happen and make this a legit paid position. If this is something you want to do, I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. So I got in front of wrestling and gelled really well with those guys and their staff. And ironically, at the time, their head assistant was let go. So it was like the perfect storm, perfect time. I was offered assistant wrestling coach and then assistant strength and conditioning coach for whatever teams wanted to utilize me coming up in that fall of 2011. So that's what I did from 2011 till late 2014, assistant wrestling coach, and then strength and conditioning coach at UW-Platteville. For all sports, I think wrestling was my main jam. That's the team I spent the most time with, obviously, as an assistant on staff. But softball, volleyball, women's basketball, men's basketball, women's soccer, men's soccer, helped out with Coach Wagner a little bit with the football guys a little bit. So I did that for about 3.5 years. And then I knew that wasn't always the end goal. Always had the thought process in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, I want to be, I want to make it to the Division I level, because I had a taste of it, when I was an intern at Wisconsin. I got to see the bright lights and stand on the sidelines and do all that kind of stuff. So started looking into grad schools, toured a few places, did a ton of research. I was like, if I'm gonna move away and spend a ton of money and do this thing, I want to do it right, pick the best program I can find for education, and hopefully strength and conditioning stuff will line up with it. So I picked a program first, and it happened to be Appalachian State. And the reason I chose that was they were putting out a ton of research at the time with Dr. Triplett and Dr. McBride, Dr. Zwetzloot, and some of the folks down there. They're putting out a ton of really good stuff. So I was like, well, that's a good place to start. And then when I got down there, it just felt like home. And then at the time, Dr. Travis Triplett, she became the president of the NSCA. So I'm like, well, shit, that's a no-brainer too, right? Like these people have got to be able to help me, once I graduate from here. Like they've got to know people who've come through the exercise science, strength and conditioning program. So I ended up going down there for my master's and balanced a ton there. So academics were tough, man. Like I don't even remember what low percentage they allowed in the program, but I was like, I walked in, I thought I was the dumbest person in class. And I mean, it was an awesome and humbling experience, but education second to none. So I got to do that, and I got to be a graduate assistant within the department to see kind of some of the research side of things that I had no idea about that was going on in like a clinical side of strength and conditioning, or doing muscle biopsies and research and all that kind of stuff. Really eye-opening. And then we're also I got to go intern with the strength staff, which shout out to App State for tallying up another big win this year.
Crazy. I was just looking it up too. I think their first, was it September 3rd? Some of them must have been their first week. They lost to UNC 63-61. Then they come back and beat Texas A&M 17-14.
So I'm super proud of that, because everybody's like, you went to Appalachian State, aren't they the ones who beat Michigan? That was like 15 years ago.
That was a while ago. Yeah,
they got some new wins now.
Yeah,
but awesome to be able to go up and to intern while I was there with Coach Mike and then Coach Matt Greenaw, who have gone on to other institutions. So again, just a great experience while I was there. They hooked me up with a summer internship up at Penn State. Got to go up there and balance. I worked with previously it was Coach Galt. I believe he's since retired, with football, and then also working with Coach Cam Davidson with volleyball and men's hockey and some throwers. He's also since moved on. He just became the director of strength and conditioning, head director at Colorado College. So I spent the summer up at State College, and Coach Cam is second to none, man. He's the best mentor I could have ever asked for. I owe that guy a lifetime of gratitude. So the guys at App State kind of knew some people at Penn State. They helped me get the internship at Penn State. I come back, I graduate at App State, and then I got hired by Cincinnati Reds down at their spring training complex. I knew I didn't really want to. I didn't. Be honest with you, I didn't love baseball at the time until I really got there and got thrown into it, and then I kind of fell in love with it. But again, it wasn't something that I wanted to do for a lifetime, because when you start at that lower level, you might start at the spring training complex, and then you got to go to low A, and then maybe the next year you'll go to high A, and then the next year go to double A. So you're constantly living in different spots, which at, I don't know, I was 25, 26, no, 27 at the time, I think. I was like, I'm not about that life. Like, maybe out of undergrad, that would have been sweet. But so about the time my team season was finishing up with Cincinnati Reds, I was with the rookies, true rookies. Our buddy, JD Melhorn, who was up here at Minnesota as Cal's assistant with hockey, and then he was also running baseball, doing some other stuff. He had been hired here before we even left grad school, so he left early before the rest of us because Cal Dietz called him up and said, "Hey, come be my assistant." So who the hell's going to pass that up?
Yeah.
So JD calls me and is like, "Hey, wrestling, they're looking for a new strength coach. Like, this is you. Like, I'll let Coach Wiley know like your name, and then the rest is in your hands. If you want to apply, you want to interview, that's as far as that was it." So I was like, again, no brainer for me to move closer to home. So now I'm like 4.5 hours from home. Division I wrestling, Big Ten wrestling. Like, I grew up watching this staff, that staff right now. These are the guys that I watched when I was a kid. Like, I remember watching Coach Becker and Coach Egan, who are our head and assistant coaches, wrestle. I remember the dynasty that they kind of started. So I was like, this is beyond anything I could ever dream of.
Sure.
And then, running it back again to what I said about Coach Cam, he called and he knew some people on staff here and put in a good word for me. So thankfully they brought me up for an interview. And like I said, I've been here ever since the start of year 7. It's been crazy. I can't believe it. It's flown by.
That is crazy. That's a pretty wild story. And also, I was thinking, like, as you were mentioning, obviously you getting some exposure in baseball too, kind of, helping the situation where, you're going to go in there, you're going to work with wrestling, obviously. But hey, it's like we got all the respect from these baseball guys because we know, hey, Scott has been in a situation where he's worked with some professional ball players or amateur, whatever the case is. So kind of, if you want to kind of speak on that, not necessarily the baseball aspect, but if you want to just talk about your experience now, obviously working with wrestling, you've already alluded to the fact that they've moved your office out of the strength and conditioning. Obviously, you're upstairs, you're in wrestling, so you're a wrestling guy. How has your experience been, obviously, with the wrestling team and what you're doing now? And maybe touch on a little bit of, how what you're doing now and some of the principles you're implementing now have changed from the way things used to be.
Yeah. So, kind of to touch on the baseball side of it, so I do wrestling and baseball. After the first semester that I was here, JD ended up going to UConn, and he was running baseball at the time. So I'd obviously had a close relationship with him. So when he was on the floor with his guys, like, I'd chop it up with him a little bit and like get to know a few of the guys. And that just kind of worked out organically. And then when he left, I went to our boss and I was like, "Hey, like, I got baseball experience. I really enjoy working with baseball guys. JD set a great culture now in the weight room. I think I can take that over seamlessly." And baseball staff was on board with it because some of the guys I had already kind of met, and coaching staff here, or the strength staff here was cool with it. So I'm extremely blessed that those are my two teams. I get wrestling and baseball. Like, I mean, I've never had to work a day in my life here. It's just every day getting up for work is so easy because I work for two incredible programs, and the dudes, the athletes are great. The coaches are great. It's super good. But yeah, obviously the majority of my background actually is in wrestling. Grew up wrestling. I mean, watching my siblings wrestle, and then I, wrestled and coached high school Division III level, and then somehow I've been so grateful and fortunate to land here. And again, year 7. So how things have changed, man, it's a ton has changed. Number one is probably my coaching style. When I first got hired at Platteville, and I hope some of my UW Platteville wrestlers see this and chime in and listen, because they deserve a lot of love, man. They put up with some stuff. I was 23, didn't know what I was doing. Thought I had to be a bigger personality than what I really was. So is either my way or the highway. Man, you better already be off the ground when I say jump. You didn't even have time to say how high. But that's not who I am. I'm a lot more, I'd like to think I'm a lot more laid back. So I don't know. I think my coaching personality or coaching styles a lot more realistic to who I really am, and get a lot more out of the guys. Not to say I didn't get a lot out of the guys when I was at UW Platteville. They gave me everything and then some. But they get a lot of credit, man, because they had to deal with a young coach. And I think you talk to a lot of young coaches. You don't know what you don't know, and you're trying to earn respect, and you're trying to be somebody you're not, and you're trying to stand on a higher pedestal than you need to. Just, it's I don't know if I would have had the same outcome and the same relationships and the same bonds that I formed with those guys had I been a little more easygoing. I'm not really sure. I don't regret it. Being kind of a hard ass, or trying to be a hard ass, is the best way to put it. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Trying to be a hard ass, like a damn drill sergeant. And it wasn't like that. But yeah, I think so. So now it's more about, you get more, you attract more with honey than vinegar.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I get a little bit more out of the guys if I'm a little bit more relaxed and toned down a little bit. So I'd say for sure, that's probably one of the biggest things that I've changed. Otherwise, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, just really having an understanding, or a thorough understanding of the scientific principles and the foundation that everything that strength and conditioning coaches build upon. I understood, or at least I thought I knew what hypertrophy was. I thought I knew what power was. I thought I knew what strength was. I didn't know shit.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything 11 years ago. So understanding actually what volume is, and how it affects their ability to recover or not, and how you mix in the different levels of stress. And the majority of us have all read triphasic, and I'm not, and it's easy for me to talk about triphasic because Coach Kale's here. But even aside from that, like, if you read the first 2 chapters of triphasic, he lays out the concept of stress, stupid simple, and about how that dictates everything. I didn't know anything about that 11 years ago. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think just having a better understanding of that kind of stuff. I mean, perfect example, like when I was at UW Platteville, my first couple of years as a strength and conditioning coach, and also a wrestling coach, I didn't understand anything about peaking. So I was crushing guys with volume in the weight room, being like bodybuilding workouts of whatever, 4x8 or 4x10 on squats when we're in the middle of in season. and then they're struggling to get weight off to try to manage their weight, and then they're looking like dog crap out on the mat during competition.
Yeah.
I remember one time we were wrestling somebody we should have handled. I can't even remember who it was. I remember coming into the staff locker room afterwards of the next day, and the athletic director was in there. I'm like, oh, this guy he's going to fire me because I'm making these athletes look like crap. And I didn't know why they looked like crap. Like of course it wasn't me, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, hey man, I know they're in shape. I don't know what was going on yesterday. They didn't look good. And I don't even remember what his response was. I just remember this brief conversation of that feeling. Well, yeah, if I'm crushing them with volume, you know, a hypertrophy stimulus 48 hours before a wrestling match, and then they got to manage their weight or get their weight off, that's a perfect storm to look like crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, you fast forward 11 years, I'm certainly not going to do that again. So just focusing more on understanding what it means to peak the guys for competition. And that might mean week to week, or just focusing more on really quality reps. So just really pinpointing volume and how big of a role that plays in how they feel and how they perform. And we'll use a lot of velocity based training once we're in season to kind of dictate loads and sets and volume. But again, having a down to earth conversation about how they're feeling and that kind of stuff. But I'm also at practice every day. So I'll have a pretty good idea if somebody had a crappy practice or they're smoked after practice. They're probably going to be smoked by the time they come in for weights 6 hours, you know, with me 6 hours later. So
sure. Yeah.
You know, I would definitely say that kind of stuff, you know, my coaching style, volume. Other big thing I'd say that's really changed for me is we can spend an hour in the weight room, have the best lift ever possible. Okay. And even if they don't have practice that day, so they spent 1 hour with me, they still have 23 other hours in the day that's going to do maybe a lot more good or a lot more damage to the foundation of work that we've put in.
Sure.
And that doesn't push aside the importance of strength and conditioning, but it can overshadow it easily.
Yeah.
They eat, the way they sleep, the way they live their life certainly overshadows how they train.
Yeah.
So just really trying to educate them on the importance of how to live like a professional, how to treat their bodies right, all hours of the day. This isn't something that they can pick and choose.
Right.
Especially at this level. I mean, wrestling in the Big Ten is as grueling as it gets.
Yeah.
So we never have an off week. You know, once we're in season, there's never an easy week. I don't care who we wrestle. It's never easy, you know?
Yeah.
So getting them to try to kind of understand that. I don't know. I guess the last thing would be like, I used to be so big on like 1 rep maxes and, but their 1 rep max today is different than what their 1 rep max is next week. So it doesn't matter for my guys.
Right.
You know, it might matter for football, for a football weight room that gets all their numbers put up on the board. But that's so unrealistic to what their day-to-day strength really is.
Yeah.
You know, so it is, I get it. If you've got 110 guys and you need some hype and it's a huge recruiting thing. And I think we've all been through it. Of like, our team max has gone up, you know, 15 pounds this year. Or like here's our biggest numbers. Like it's you can use it as recruiting.
Yeah, for sure.
Or you can use it to boost your ego.
Yeah. And they will.
but I'm not going to waste a day. I'm not going to waste a day or a week to figure out everybody's 1 rep max.
Right.
The amount of the little amount of time that I get with these guys in the weight room, it's not worth it, you know? Yeah. So just kind of understanding that, like, it's going to change. That stuff's, it's relative to really how they've recovered, or how their week's been, how their stress levels are of academic stress, social stress, like practice. And they're just balancing so much. Like those numbers change all the time.
Yeah, I think it's a much more realistic approach. I also wonder too, like given the sport of wrestling and how combative it is, obviously, and how they're constantly in an engaged state, how much one rep max work would you really like? I mean, I even like hate, like I even like kind of get annoyed using the term, and just like it's just so like overused in our industry. Like, oh, we need to have one rep maxes, and we're gonna come back from a summer, and we're gonna have it's like we're gonna have a one rep max in a movement that is so almost completely unrelated to having any transfer to whatever it is that you do within your sport. But we need to have this one rep max, so we're gonna take a ton of energy that could be used elsewhere into more productive things to make sure that we get a good idea of what your one rep max is. But and it's not to say that I don't understand, like it's not to say that I don't appreciate strength levels, right? Like I think that there's definitely, but I think having that realistic approach to like where they're at on certain days and obviously what other stressors are going to be coming into their lives. And to go back to what I said about the wrestling thing, I mean, just my brief like understanding of this, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit more, but like the actual like components, right? Like that sort of like coactive approach of wrestling, whether your physical, your psychological, your technical, and your tactical. Like the physical aspect is such a major piece in every single thing that they're doing. I mean, they live on the mat in a very physical presence, right? Sure, there's a lot of tactical work and a lot of technical stuff, but it's like it seems like if I was to have them come into the weight room and just constantly just drive them home, like you're driving that message home, like you were talking about what you did when you were younger. It's so funny because you look back on that now and you're like, how could I have ever thought that would be a good idea? But I did the exact same thing when I was young. It's just like, oh, I have this program later. I need to do this program. You know what I mean? I'm supposed to be hitting some eccentric bench today. You know what I mean? Like what? We can't not eccentric bench today. You know what I mean? We got to get this stuff in, right? So it's like it's just wild how like little, like I work with a younger hockey player now, and I'm so glad that he's getting me at this stage in my life because he's like 14 years old, right? Up 31. Whereas if he got like the 20-year-old version of me, he'd be like, all right, man, here's what we got. You know what I mean? So but yeah, so like where is that like for you? Like how do you kind of view that, right? Like those like coactives of wrestling, right? Like technical, tactical, physical, psychological. Like do you think about those? Like how do you kind of like navigate those when it comes to what you're doing with your guys?
Yeah, so interesting question. Like our assist, one of our assistants, Zach Sanders, 4-time All-American. He's a phenomenal presence in the sport of Division I college wrestling. Incredible individual. Still practice what he preaches. So he's an awesome asset to have on staff, which most wrestling coaches are. What other sport do you go to practice and you see the coaches strapped up practicing with the guy? You're not going to football practice. You ain't going to any football practice. I don't care at any level, and watching the coaches throw some pads on. Our coaches are down there grind across all all levels. High school, Division I, Division II, Division III, all levels. Your coaches are in there scrapping with the dudes. Out every day. It's wild.
It is wild, actually. I never really thought about that, but that is wild. Imagine a baseball coach like trying to like take some BP,
right? and trying to do it seriously. Like, it's pretty incredible. Our administrators, they've got to shake their heads when they walk into practice and they see our coaches who are, some are 40 years old, still down there giving these young bucks fits, man. I have no doubt some of the majority of our coaches could probably still get up on the podium right now. But that's just the way the sport is. But anyhow, Coach Sanders is always like, what is wrestling? Wrestling is lifting weights in a sense. Like you're applying force against another object for anywhere between 7 to 10 minutes. So it's an all-out resistance session. I mean, everything I try to do to you, you fight back. There's no free interaction. Everything you do has to interact against another human. That's
no one's letting you pull moves on them.
So understanding that, I mean, I know, I've never obviously competed or practiced at this high of a level, but I know what it feels like to go through whatever, a 20-minute grind match, and or what a practice feels like. So, I can have a pretty good sense, and I got a pretty good relationship with almost all the guys on the team to understand, like, what they're going through at practice, and if they're smoked, when they come into the weight room, because we typically practice at like 10. A lot of days we'll lift at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So they've had 4 or 5 hours to recover, but if it's been an ass kicker of a practice, that's not very much time, so just having to have honest conversations to be like, you're looking smoked today. Like, I know this morning was hard. Like, let's tailor it back. Let's knock off a set. Maybe, if we're out of season, maybe we won't go heavier this week. That's okay. I don't care. Because next week we might be able to surpass that. So that's okay. Let's get quality work out of what your body's going to give you today. So just kind of understanding the physical nature that they live in. It's impossible to be able to describe it to anybody who hasn't lived it. What it's like to go through a 6, 7, 8 minute live go at not even at a high level, but just trying to go. I don't know. I was trying to explain it to somebody out the other day. I was like, I don't know. Think about an offensive football player. I don't care what their position is. Somebody who's in on every offensive snap throughout the course of a game. All the work that they expend in those short little, every single play, okay, put all those plays together that they were in on, combine all that work into 6 or 7 minutes. No breaks, no timeouts, no substitutions, no water breaks, no period breaks, no half times, no nothing. That's in 6 or 7 minutes. And let me tell you how you feel. Tell me how you feel. So that's kind of it's exhausting. You tap into literally, you're going to exhaust every energy system. And then, if we're at the national tournament, sometimes you get to do it 3 times in a day, or more if you're on the back, if you're losing.
And so just for clarity, I have obviously my brief time doing jiu-jitsu. Obviously there is like you can be completely dominant just from your back the entire time, not necessarily the entire time, but you can do some serious damage from the being on your back and being on the ground. Whereas in wrestling, obviously that's not the case. So what are some of the like basic principles of wrestling, and how, just from my own curiosity, to be honest with you, like as far as, because obviously like I've been through, not a live, well, not necessarily, I wouldn't say it wasn't live, it was live, but like we'll do like 10-minute rounds. It's live sparring, but it's like, it's not a competition, right? So like there's training partners, right? It's different. It's practice essentially, right? And I've yet to obviously step onto a mat and compete, at that level. And I don't know, if I ever will, but anyway, like
come on up to Minnesota, Will. We'll bring you to practice.
Get me primed up. Yeah. But I would imagine, right, like as far as like all of the aspects that go into what, like I talk to a lot of the guys who I train with and girls who obviously have competed, and I'm like, what does it feel like, right? But like as they call your name and you're about to step onto the mat, and that there's somebody else on the other end who isn't your training partner anymore, and they don't care, right? Like they want to win, right? So like what are some of those like tactical and like technical aspects that are like a little different from jiu-jitsu to wrestling? Because I have a lot of wrestlers that we'll train with, and I'm like, man, these guys are great. Like they're just so great at being on top and just like making shit happen, But how is it a little different in wrestling, and some of those things that people may have a little bit of misperception with when it comes to how that kind of dictates that total body, like energy exertion of just pure all out fatigue and constant resistance and constant strain, constant engagement that you're describing?
Yeah, so I try to approach a lot of things with a head, hands, and hips kind of philosophy. Not to be cookie cutter or cliche or have a little catchphrase, but I think about head, hands, and hips, man. Starts with the head, because if you got a weak neck or weak postural control and you're starting out the match, the first thing somebody's always going to do is get on your head and try to snap you down or move. Where your head goes, your body follows.
Yeah.
Where your head goes, your body follows.
For
100%
sure.
of the time. So if I want to misdirect you or position you where I can set up my takedowns, I'm probably going to move your head to one side or position it somehow, set you up to, and it starts with the head. So if I've got somebody with a weak neck or can't tolerate that, or they're getting snapped all over the place, gonna try to strengthen obviously their upper body, their neck strength, their core strength. They're just trying to improve postural control. Hands, if grip strength is everything. And if you can control somebody's grip in the sport of wrestling, whether it's in the neutral position where both guys are on their feet, or if you're in the top position, typically when you've taken somebody down, you're on in the top position, looking to turn or expose somebody's back or hopefully pin them, or even if you're on the bottom, if your roles reversed and you're on the bottom position where you've been taken down, or at the start of the period, you start down to try to come up and escape to get back to neutral. Hand control dictates a lot of those positions. If I can control somebody's hands, just makes life a lot easier. So working on grip strength a ton, and then hips. Obviously, any athlete with powerful and strong and explosive hips is hopefully going to dominate a lot of positions, and that's no different in wrestling. Whether I'm trying to get a guy's trying to explode through a shot, or if a guy takes a shot and gets stuck underneath, how he can get his hips back underneath of him to be able to get himself in a better position, or if you're on top or bottom positions, hip strength and control is crucial. So try to model a lot of our stuff around, I guess, those three principles. I don't know if that helps you kind of understand.
That does. Yeah. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to ask a question before I forget. So this is something that I'm very curious about, because you mentioned things, especially when it comes to combat sports, you mentioned things like grip strength, obviously, neck strength, the ability to obviously kind of maintain posture, whether it be through the neck to the core, midsection, whatever the case is. And then obviously explosive hips, whether it be in terms of like recovering or actually, performing and just having explosive hips. See if I want to ask this the right way, but like, I wonder all the time, because like now that I've like entered into this like jujitsu realm, right? It's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I'm going to, it's not that I didn't think any of these qualities were important before, but now it's like, oh, like, I've been told like we should definitely emphasize those things like grip strength, obviously neck strength. And so I'll do other things, right? Like I do like a lot of extra stuff to try to like touch on those qualities. But then I wonder to myself, I'm like, and maybe you can answer this. So I'll kind of like tell you what I think, and then I'll like phrase it as a question. Like, when I'm on the mat and I'm grabbing a lapel, well, I mean, obviously there's grip strength. That's extremely, that is grip strength right there. Right. And I'm wondering to myself, like how much, like are a lot of the qualities that you talk about, right, developing, how much of them do you think come from being on the mat and just doing these things in general versus how much like extra work you feel you need to do in the weight room? And like, if you do, like, what is that extra work and what does it look like? Right. Like if you know that these guys are okay, like obviously their neck is getting a ton of work while they're on the mat. There's constantly somebody trying to grab the top of your head, grab the back of your neck. There's constantly, the grip strength is obviously there. You're always trying to figure out your grips. Right. So like what, yeah, like how much of that is how much extra work of that is needed, right, in the weight room or in just in training in general versus how much of that they're actually getting on the mat? Maybe it differs from like freshman to sophomore to junior, senior kind of thing. Yeah, if you can, I don't know. I tried to phrase as best as I could.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from, and that's a spot on question for the sport of wrestling, because I already said it. Like Coach Sanders says, wrestling is resistance training all the time. And I don't do a ton of like manual neck resistance and that kind of stuff with my guys, even though I've already told you part of my kind of quote unquote philosophy is head, hands, and hips. Like I don't do a lot of 4-way neck or manual resistance stuff or a lot of shrugs or that kind of stuff with my guys, because exactly that, they're getting so much of it at practice. And I actually just had, I don't know, about a month ago, we were having like a little strength coaches discussion about some things. And Coach Dietz was talking about some new performance models that he's working on. And some of the concepts he was talking about in terms of neck strength and grip strength and doing some isometric stuff. And he said, and he'd kind of asked me about that, or we didn't ask me, but had a conversation about it. I was like, honestly, I don't even do a lot of neck stuff with guys anymore, because I'm not gonna, too much of a good thing is unnecessary. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need them to come from practice where they're getting constantly pulling on each other, and having sore necks and sore backs is usually where we see it. Our guys, I mean, their backs are sore a lot because they have to stay in a certain position on their feet while somebody's constantly trying to tug on them and move them around. I was like, I'm not gonna compound that and make it worse. You know, now if I have an individual who is weak as a kitten and I can see him getting snapped around, then I will with him one-on-one, you know, or I'll add that in at the end of his list. I'll write it on the bottom of their sheet. And that's obviously where the individual approach comes pretty necessary to this sport.
Yeah.
But they're already getting a ton of that. Grip strength, I pick and choose. Again, if I know we're in a real light phase of practice where we're going to be spending a lot more time on technique, so practices aren't maybe as high intense, there's not as much live volume, then I'll work on it a little bit more. But usually what we've been doing lately is part of the list is we'll just start out the lift with it. You know, we'll start out with some plate pinch carries or farmer carries or that kind of stuff. They tolerate it so well. I mean, let a wrestler grab onto you. I mean, their grip's phenomenal.
Oh, it's strong. You feel it. It's like, yeah.
So I'm less concerned about doing additional grip work than I am, you know, about doing neck strengthening or upper body or postural stuff, because you start to do that, then, you know, you might piss off their erectors and all of a sudden their backs are sore, and then they're in their training room too much, and you know, again, too much of a good thing is unnecessary, whereas grip strength's a little more forgiving, and they tolerate that a lot more. So yeah, I mean, exactly what you said, like they get a lot of the qualities in practice, what they do every day of their life, of a lot of things I try to complement in the weight room, and just being really smart about how much to program and volume wise about those areas.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer. Yeah, I don't know. It's so interesting to me because I'm always like, oh, like, should we be doing more, like more, right? And I think like what you said while I'm like on the topic, obviously could probably be applied to almost any coach and anybody listening to this, especially like young strength coaches. I think this is the one thing that I'm so glad that I picked up on it when I did, but I was just kind of like, I forget who was the first person to ever say this to me. And I think now it's a little bit more of a common theme, but like given what they're not getting in practice, right? And it's like, okay, well that makes a lot of sense. It's like, we know that they get into these positions during practice. This is like typically where their hips are located, right? We need to obviously maybe work in different, directions, or obviously a certain amount of degrees lower or higher than that, depending on where they're at, depending on the sport, whatever. Okay, they get a ton of this in practice. Maybe they don't need as much of that here in the training. You know what I mean? Kind of think of everything as like a whole pie, and what is represented in each slice, and go from there. So I think that's probably something that rings true for almost every sport, and regardless of whether it's a physical, whether it's physical combat, whether it's a sport that has a ton of finesse or whatever the case is. I think a lot of that is like, just give them what they're not getting, so kind of with that. Yeah, go ahead.
Wrestling's such a unique sport. Like I mean, I know we've all gotten away from it in the last, I think we've all poo-pooed on the whole thought of sport specific weightlifting, that kind of stuff, which absolutely I agree with, but there is no sport specific weightlifting when it comes to wrestling. Like they're not in one specific joint angle for more than a millisecond. Are they a rotational sport? Sometimes. Are they a linear sport? Are they a lateral sport? Like they're obviously not a running sport, right? Like but they're a mixed bag of everything. So really being like sport specific in the weight room, they're already hitting on everything everything we do in the weight room is always going to be, it's never going to be as difficult as what they do in practice.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, whereas baseball, one of my baseball guys, you know, when my wrestlers come in, like I could crush them, right? Unnecessarily. And then they're probably going to feel like crap at practice. Okay. So then that does me no good. But if I give them the most appropriate quality based lift I can give them, it's going to be less taxing and less like, it really requires less focus for them than it does for them at practice, because practice is so intense. Like it has to be, it's 1-versus-1 combat.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you my best. You're going to be beating my ass all over the room. That's not fun. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, you know what? The weights, they don't hit back.
Yeah.
You know? So it's not really comparable. But on the opposite side, you got my baseball guys. They're out at practice. Some of them, they have off days at practice where they don't have to do anything, or practice is real low key. And they can kind of stand around and shag fly balls and kind of bullshit around a little bit. They come into the weight room, their focus is a lot of times, I'm not saying their focus is bad at practice.
Right.
It just doesn't need to be locked in at the same degree as it does for a wrestler. They come into the weight room, I can have a little bit more focus or intensity out of them. So it's kind of unique in that sense.
Yeah, there's a higher cost associated with like a lack of mental, you know, toughness or whatever, I guess you say, or just overall, not necessarily toughness, but just like mental engagement, right? Like if you're not like cognitively engaged in wrestling practice, there's a higher cost of what can go down than obviously if, you know, not to say that if you're, you know, if you're not paying attention in baseball practice, you might get hit with like a pop fly or something like that.
I'm not saying my guys don't work super hard out at baseball practice, because they do. Like, I mean, baseball is such a, it's kind of comparing a bull in a china shop with wrestlers. Yeah. And I don't know. Hummingbird in a china shop with baseball, because it's a lot more finesse. It's a lot more precise.
Oh yeah. It's a very, very fine motor skill. Like hitting a baseball like 90-mile-an-hour plus is a very fine motor skill that you don't, like, people don't pick that up later in life. You know, just something that you need to, and like that, and throwing a baseball, like it just, I mean, I was a baseball player. I have a massive appreciation for baseball. I watch it every single night. And I don't care like here or there to like just, you know, argue about like, oh, like are baseball players athletes or are they not, or whatever the case may be. Like,
they absolutely are.
I've seen some of the most incredible. I mean, most of the guys that I played baseball with were, you know, double and multi and tri-sport athletes, regardless of whether they did it in high school or college or whatever the case was. I think there was a study that came out. I probably shouldn't put this on a podcast, but I'm pretty sure there was a study came out, at least when I was back in college, that was like, you know, players that played in the MLB were actually the highest percentage of tri-sport athletes. Either it was in like high school or college, I forget what it was, but yeah, I mean, you look at some of these guys, it's like most of them could probably play sports and play other sports and do other things, you know. It's just like, but you know, it's very fine motor skills. Each position requires very fine, you know, very different motor skills, right? So it's an interesting sport.
It is an incredible sport, and again, like I'm super blessed for the two teams that I work with, and and I know I'll spend the majority of my time talking about wrestling on here. I'd rather go downstairs and get my butt whooped at a wrestling practice than standing and take BP against our guys any day. Because I would look such like a fool. So I got the utmost respect for my baseball guys. I love them to death. And I mean, anybody baseball who plays because it takes such skill, whatever position you are. But sorry, I know I cut you off with whatever. I think you're asking a question, but
no, you're good. Yeah. So I guess like really now, you know, kind of coming up on an hour here, I want to give you a chance to, obviously, if there's anything, you know, kind of like that you think, whether it's somebody who works in the world of wrestling, as a strength coach, as a coach, as an athlete, any sort of like words of wisdom that you kind of want to impart on them. Sort of like, you know, you're kind of like closing thoughts, like you're where you're at this point in your career, kind of like all encompassing, like conclusive thoughts of like what you think as far as, you know, words of wisdom that you can kind of impart on anybody, whether it be younger or older, working in the world of wrestling, strength and conditioning, coach, athlete, whatever the case may be.
Like I said, I think this is the start of year 11 for me, year 7 at Minnesota. So realistically, holistically, I'm new. I'm young yet, right? Yeah, this is pretty young, pretty young in the game. But when I first took over here, up until this past summer, I was in charge of our interns, and I think that's the internships that you do lay such a foundation for your development and your love for this career. And we always have so many interns who come through the doors, and they just do it because they love to lift weights, or they see some cool stuff on Instagram, and they just don't make it. You know what I'm saying? So I guess if I had any parting wisdom, not necessarily wrestling specific or baseball specific or anything like that, but just more so for younger strength coaches who are interns or wherever that trying to come to the game, like, you got to pay your dues. You got to pay your dues, and understand that there's always somebody knocking at the door.
Yeah.
You know, we're all replaceable. Like, they could get rid of me tomorrow, and there'd probably be 100 applicants by the end of the week. There's always somebody new knocking at the door. So you really got to, when you get the opportunity to put your head down and show up in an internship, to put your head down and grind as much as you can, and pay your dues, and figure out a way to separate yourself a little bit. For me, like, I look back on like the second day of my internship when I was with the Wisconsin Badgers with their football staff. I didn't know anything. I look back on it now. I didn't know anything. So I was like, how the hell did I get in with those guys? But I look back on it. I didn't know what I was doing. Came in with an open mind, put my head down, and Coach Ben Herbert, who's now at Michigan, so he's running the deal at Michigan, and then Jameel Walker, who's running the deal down at Arkansas. They asked me to do something simple, like, it was an off day before the guys came to start summer training, so we hadn't even had groups yet. So I showed up, a couple days beforehand to get the lay of the land and get to know those guys a little bit. They asked me to do something simple, like organize the weight vests, and that's all they said. So I had a couple totes of weight vests, and they had like the weights you put down in them. Pulled them all out, like laid every single weight out on the floor, pulled out all the vests, and like, I was like, hey, do you guys have like, some cleaner or something? And they came out, they're like, holy cow, like, you're going above and beyond. Like, and I'm not saying like that makes a difference, but I went above and beyond to try to separate myself, or try to like make my presence known as somebody who was somebody that they could trust to do a good job. And by midsummer, I remember Coach Jameel being like, the quality of work you do is a representation of who you are. And like, obviously you presented that early on. So kind of going back to your question of like messages for others, or for younger people trying to get in this field, it's super competitive to get in. I mean, it's super hard to stay in. You got to do something when you got the opportunity to pay your dues, you got to do something to kind of separate yourself appropriately. And there's a ton of tangents we can go on down that. I think a lot of people take that the wrong way, not a very genuine approach. And a lot of interns will come in and they want to make themselves known, so they try to kiss ass, or they ask dumb questions at the wrong time. Like, you got to be genuine. And again, trying to find something to separate yourself, and it's different for everybody, right? Like, but the problem is, like, we've all been there. We've all been asked to clean weights, to stay late, to come early. Like, we've all balanced work, social life, education, the internship stuff. Like, what you're about to tell us, or like whatever your excuses are, you might as well leave them at the door. So like, it's not, we've all been through it. So you got to do something to be able to to show us you genuinely want to be a part of this. Otherwise, we're not going to stick our neck out for you. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, it's a game of paying your dues, but that's what makes a difference. You know, had I not had a good experience at App to get the internship at Penn State, to have those groups of people to stick their neck out for me at Minnesota, I wouldn't be here. And this is beyond a dream job.
Yeah.
You know? So, and I'm kind of rambling on there a little bit, but certainly it's about paying your dues. And I can't remember who said this to me, but it might have been my dad. Or I don't know who it was, but like, who you know will get you in the door, what you know will keep you there.
Yeah.
And that's what this field is, you know, because it's a relationship field. You know, like, I know when you're first trying to get in the game and you're first trying to get that job, you're getting pissed because you think other people are getting hired who don't have the same knowledge base as you and the same experience as you. But guess what? They knew somebody, and this thing's about relationships. And I'm going to hire somebody who I know is going to develop really good relationships with my athletes and get the most out of my athletes.
Right.
And so,
yeah. No, I think those are great points. And I think, you know, it's not to, you know, come across like a hardo or anything like that, but I think that there has to be some sort of, you know, hierarchy as to how you go about approaching these things, right? Like I just, you know, and that's just like my approach, and everybody can approach internships a little bit differently. And I do think that, you know, everybody should approach internships differently. Every intern is going to be a little bit different, but like you said, just being genuine, being yourself, and that'll give you an opportunity to really find out if this is for you or not. You know what I mean? It's not, I think that there are some practices, obviously, when it comes to being an intern that are a little much and probably aren't as productive. And those things have changed over the years, but I do think there should be, at the end of the day, you do need to provide some value. You need to put your head down. You need to absorb. You need to try to do the basics really, really well first, and then it'll kind of allow you, you know, to open up some doors for you. It's really not a complicated thing. I think it's just kind of finding that balance between like, all right, how can I like show that I'm willing to put my head down and just not necessarily ask too many questions at first, just like understand that there's a tradition that was set out here way before I even got here. They have a way of doing things. I'm going to do things the way that they're asking me to do them because I respect them and I respect the idea that they've given me an opportunity to at least like, you know, be in this space. Right. And then as they give you, you know, sort of a little bit more leeway and the people you're working for give you a little bit more autonomy, you know, questions can come. And then obviously the idea of, you know, developing those relationships come, and you kind of get to a point where it's like, all right, there's a nice balance between like, I work hard, but I also know when it's time to like show them that I do have a ton of capabilities. Cause I'm sure a lot of interns do. Like, I'm sure a lot of interns come in and they're like, and a lot of them are great. Like there are a lot of ones who like aren't, you know what I mean? But there's a lot of dudes,
intelligent.
Yeah. They're eager,
but they lack some feel.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like we get like, I know, like, and I was the same way as an intern. I'm like, oh, because I was a 26-year-old intern. So like that was like I had worked in the private sector for like, you know, whatever, 6 years before going to Alabama. So it's kind of like I came in there, I'm like, dang, like I really do, like I spent a lot of time, like I'm 26, like I'm not 19, you know what I mean? So it's like I spent a lot of time, I kind of like knew more as I got into the college than most people do, right? But I've kind of gotten past that like really raw stage that like we had talked about earlier. So you know, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But I do think, you know, there is value though in kind of roughing it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Some things are a little not necessarily ideal. But I do think that at the end of the day, like there's ways to find, you know, a way to get things done, you know, and make it happen wherever you're at. And you know, again, it's all different depending on where you're at, and it's all different depending on your situation. But
it has to be more than just loving being in the weight room.
Yeah, for sure.
You better love being in a weight room because you're probably gonna have to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I can say that. I mean, I've done that life. Now, unfortunately, I don't have to necessarily anymore because we really prioritize the value of sleep for our guys. So we've shifted a lot of our practices and lifts around. So
nice.
I'm really fortunate that we're able to do that. But yeah, you better love the weight room because you're going to be in there early. But if you do have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and you rub your eyes and your feet hit the floor and you're like, shit, I don't want to go there. This is not the field for you.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I've woken up, I wake up every day, and there's never been a single day, whether I was an intern and much like yourself, man, like when I was at App State, I'd already been a full-time paid coach for 3 years. And I came back I dropped it all to pursue more.
Yeah.
So I'd already been programmed for 6, 7 other teams. I've already done the whole deal. And now I got to show up and clean racks and wash shaker bottles. But I didn't care. It's about paying your dues, So, but if going back to what I was saying, like, I've never, whether it was a day as an intern or, over whatever day it's been, like, I'm very fortunate to say I've never had to, I love what I do. So I've never had to work a day in my life. And even if that means getting up at 4, 5, 6 in the morning and staying till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and then doing it all again, doesn't matter, because it's such a rewarding career if you're able to pay your dues and make it to where you want to be. You better be where your feet are. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't get somewhere, don't get an opportunity. Once you do get your opportunity somewhere, like, don't always be on the lookout for what the next best thing is, because then you're not taking advantage of the opportunity you have. Like, I didn't really start looking in, I spent some time researching grad programs when I was at Platteville, but I was where my feet were. Like, my feet were in Platteville, UW Platteville. Like, that was my first opportunity. I took full advantage of it, loved every minute of it. At the end of the day, I might look back and say, whatever, 30 years from now, when I retire, I'm like, that might end up being the best job I ever had.
Yeah.
It was the first opportunity. But yeah, you certainly have to love what you're doing in this field, because it comes with a lot of different hats.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. One last thing, can you tell people where they can find it? I know you say you're not like crazy on social media, but social media, anything else you want to plug, any like final thoughts or any final words or whatever, and then we'll wrap up, Scott.
Yeah. So I guess I'm most active. I'm not active on social media. I'm not a huge social media guy. I wish I was, but I'm not. I guess I'm probably most active on Instagram. I think it's my last name and my first name. I think it's McWilliams Scott on Instagram. I have a Twitter. I don't use it. I usually just, once every 6 months, I might hop on there and scroll through.
Yeah.
We have one of our senior level athletes wrestling over at the World Championships today.
Nice.
So just trying to keep track of Team USA. That's usually what I use it for.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the best way to get a hold of me is through my school email, through the umn.edu. So that's smcwilly, smcwilli at umn.edu is the best way to get a hold of me. So social media, again, you could send me a message. I might never respond, and that's nothing personal. I just might never notice it.
Yeah. That's fair. I appreciate it. Scott, thank you so much for hopping on, man. This was awesome. Obviously, best of luck to you guys as you guys enter into the season. We're heading in, obviously they're in school now, right in the fall. So
we're rocking and rolling. Every day is something different. So that's the best part of the deal.
Yeah. Well, awesome stuff, man. Thank you so much for the wisdom that you provided today. And listeners, we'll catch you guys next time. Have a good one, Scott.